Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Pride and Prejudice Jane Austen Smackdown. This is the last of our, that's what it is, kind of. We saved the best for last. I mean, we love all the books, but Pride and Prejudice is the big one. And we're going to be debating. I think this one is most likely to have the strongest feelings, potentially, between the BBC miniseries and the movie. And I will let everyone introduce themselves short. I'm Alexa Dunn. This is my channel. Oh, my echo just went off. I wrote Brightly Burning, which is a retelling of Jane Eyre set in space, and The Stars of Steel, which is Jane Austen's Persuasion kind of set in space. So I love Jane Austen. That's me. Yay. And I have strong feelings, I think, about these movies. So,
okay,
Jennieke, if you want to go.
Yes. Thank you again, Alexa, for hosting this on your channel, because these have been so much fun. So anyway, I'm glad we could all come and talk about Pride and Prejudice today. This, the big one, the one that I think a lot of people are excited about. And I know I am. So anyway, I'm Jennieke Cohen, in case you weren't aware. And I am the author of Dangerous Alliance, and which is a novel about a Jane Austen fan in 1817, and she is a big fan of Elizabeth Bennet, actually, and she's always kind of asking herself, what would Lizzie Bennet do? So I'm very excited to talk about Pride and Prejudice, and thank you guys for joining us, Tobie and Nisha. Tobie, why don't you go first? Tell us introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, I'm Tobie Easton, and I'm the author of the Mer Chronicles series. So book 1 is Emerge, 2 is Submerge. They get progressively more mermaidy, because that's what they're about. And 3 is Immerse, see the most mermaidy of all of the covers. And basically, they ask the question, what if mermaids lived on land? And they follow a community of mermaids living in secret in Malibu, California. They have nothing really to do with Jane Austen, except for the fact that I do feel like the sister relationships have pretty definite Pride and Prejudice vibes specifically, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. But that, and then also I'm just big on like witty romance and like back and forth rapport. So I feel like that like Austen has definitely influenced these books, even if they are about mermaids in modern day California.
Hi everyone, I'm Nisha Sharma. Ooh, I have a little bit of an echo, right? Am I okay?
Yeah, there's an echo.
If you can grab headphones, it'll help.
Okay, I'm gonna grab.
If you have them.
Grab headphones. Okay. I will grab them in a second. I think it's okay, actually. Is it okay now?
It's okay now.
Okay. So I'm the author of My So-Called Bollywood Life, and although it is not a Pride and Prejudice or Jane Austen retelling, the best friend of the heroine is a Jane Austen fan and frequently quotes Pride and Prejudice. I am a huge Austen buff. I was telling these guys that my MFA thesis was on Mr. Darcy as the blueprint for the modern day alpha male in contemporary romance. I have a Pride and Prejudice quote like tattooed on my body. I have tons of stuff in my office that is like Pride and Prejudice paraphernalia. I'm wearing my Austen shirt today. I'm ready. Let's do this.
I really want to read your thesis now. I'm completely serious. I want you to email it to me.
That's so cool. Yeah, what does the shirt say? Does it have a saying?
It's if I'm honest, I actually can't read it upside down. I'll send you guys a picture. I don't even remember. I have like 7 of them, so I don't remember which one it is. It's like in the script. But I will tell you that the quote I do have on my shoulder is one of the quotes that made it into the 2005 version, which is, because some of the dialogue wasn't like directly translated, and it's she would certainly be a fearsome thing to behold. So that is
that's a good one.
That I have on my shoulder.
That's great.
Actually, I think this is the obstinate headstrong girl. I'll take a picture of you guys and send it to you.
Oh, cool. That's exciting. It's always fun. Anyway, let's see. I was going to. Okay, so why don't we go all around and say where we land as far as whether Pride and Prejudice is our favorite book, or like, you know, where it fits in our personal canon of Austen, and then like when we first read it, possibly, and when we saw these versions, and if it had an impact on us, I guess, or what kind of impact it had on us. So why don't you go first, Alexa?
Okay. Well, one of my secret shames, Jane Austen's secret shames, I tried to read Pride and Prejudice when I was 14, and I couldn't get through it. Such shame, such shame. I had no problem with Jane Eyre, but for some reason. So meaning the first time I read it, I was 17. I was stuck in Germany. Our library only had 3 books in English: Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, and not Treasure Planet. That's a Disney movie. You know, the one that's based Treasure Island. And I have still not read Treasure Island, but I got Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice out of the library, and I read Pride and Prejudice it's actually quite depressing. It was my 17th birthday. I was by myself in Germany. None of my mother's presents arrived in the mail on time. And I hope this isn't TMI for anyone, but I had my period. It was like the worst of all things all happening all at once. And then it was like the best book I'd ever read. And it was like a breath of fresh air. And I became obsessed with it. I also then got into Bridget Jones's Diary. What a year. Because it came out a few months later. And then I saw the mini-series in AP English the following year, senior year. And that was my second mind-blowing, like, how does this exist? And I have never seen it. So that was 2001. So it had come out in 95. And mostly, I mean, we know it's because, like, you know, we didn't have on-demand or the internet. So you had to come across it. But my teacher had us watch the whole thing, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. So that's my history with like the book and the miniseries. And until I fell in love with Persuasion, it was my favorite Austen, and I still think it's the most entertaining Austen, the easiest to reread, and I've read it the most. I'll recommend it to anyone. I'm like, it is a perfect rom-com. It is the modern novel. It is Hate to Love. It is perfect. It's such a good book. So good. And then, are we supposed to talk about our history with the 2005 movie yet, or?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
It came out while I was in college, and my personal claim to fame, my small moment for myself, because I was on the newspaper staff, and I went to a press screening for it, and then the next day, I had lunch with Joe Wright, and I interviewed him for our college paper. Yeah, wow. The PR person liked me a lot. And so she said, do you want to have lunch with Joe? And I didn't eat. I watched him eat while asking him questions. Wow. So I did genuinely love it, but I might be biased also because I literally had the job of reassuring him that he didn't ruin everyone's favorite Jane Austen novel, because he was terrified of the fans. He was terrified that everyone would hate it because it wasn't out yet. And I said, I thought it was beautiful. That was my 21-year-old moment.
I bet that meant so much, though, because you were like the target audience, you know?
I was like, the target audience.
Meant a lot.
Yeah, so I adore, not to tip my hand, but I slightly prefer the 2005 movie. But, I mean, they're separate but different. They're so good, but I adore the movie. Though I've always had very complicated feelings about Kiera Knightly, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. So, but I adored that movie. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Glad to know where you stand. All right, Tobie, how about you?
So I'll say this. You're going to think that I can't be critical of anything probably after watching this, and that's not true. I'm very critical of things. Jennieke can tell everyone, but I love both of these. I like everything we're going to talk about today. I really love, so I'm probably just going to be like effervescent happiness bubble. But I can't help it because these both have like just very dear places in my heart, and that actually changed with this rewatch, which I don't want to, like I said, tip my hand too much, because so I had a very special experience watching the miniseries and reading the book for the first time. I had an English teacher who was a genius and who basically decided that freshman year at my school, we would read Pride and Prejudice, and as we read enough, the reward would be watching the next episode in the miniseries.
That's smart.
an amazing experience. So I would basically, we got like, it was like the carrot that was hanging, right? And so we'd read a chunk of chapters and we get to watch an episode. And then soon enough, we didn't need the carrot because it was just so awesome that we were all just like really excited to be reading and to be watching. But it was really fun because you would get to like read a chunk and then watch that chunk. And it took place over, it feels like months, but maybe it wasn't now that I think back on it. And, so you got to look forward to like that break of a classroom period, but also really getting to like absorb the miniseries, having just read the material. And like, it was really, you was like so close on its heels and we'd all discuss it together. And I should mention that I went to an all-girls school and that this classroom was like, most of our classrooms were like new and modern in like newer parts of the building. But my English class in freshman year was in like the old part of the building. And she'd also taught art history, so she had the senior art history students paint all the walls with like beautiful pre-Raphaelite murals, and there were like bricks, and for whatever reason they hadn't updated the chalkboard or the desks in this particular classroom, so we had like the old wood desks and the like green chalkboard, and it was just this magical experience of us all in this tiny little room where all the desks were like smooshed together, reading Pride and Prejudice and watching the miniseries, and it was magic. Yeah, and I also really like the 2005 version. I'm sure we'll get into it more. But so for me, like the miniseries is kind of this like, moment.
Oh, that's so nice. What about you, Nisha?
Oh my gosh. So when I was in the 7th grade, I had gone through and read all of the romances I could get my hands on in our school library. And I didn't really want to read the classics because I was like, it's wasn't like a thing for me that I was like interested in. I didn't want to read classic romances. There's like a lot of colonialism going on, and I'm first generation Indian, so my family was pretty close to it in history. I just wasn't really interested. And my English teacher was very cognizant of that. And, she knew that there wasn't a lot of representation for South Asian romances on the shelves at the time. So she's like, just try Pride and Prejudice. She's like, it's my favorite, but the themes are universal across a lot of romances. So give it a shot. So I picked up Pride and Prejudice. I don't even know how old I was, like in the 7th grade. I didn't understand like half the language, but like it is the easiest, I think, Austen to read out of all the books. It's the easiest to pick up themes. And I was so hooked, even though I was young, and like I'm sure a lot of the stuff went right over my head the first read through. But the concept of a mom wanting to get her daughters married, worrying about, destitution, a father who is totally disinterested, and like one really super creepy guy and one like guy who's a jerk, who's like unattainable, that you like love to hate to love. It was like it's such a common theme in like South Asian culture that I was like, this is every Bollywood movie that has ever existed that I've watched since I like could basically talk and like watch a movie. And so I was like obsessed with it. And my mother, who is not a reader at all, like she's, the only time she's ever read a romance in her life, she said, was when she was pregnant with me. And for some reason she had the urge to read Daniel Steele romances. So she would like read Daniel Steele romances on the like 8 train going into the city for work during her entire pregnancy with me. And she's like, oh, I've read that book in high school, and it was the only like book that I actually read without like copying my friend's notes. Like that was my mother. And so she's like, I saw this BBC like miniseries once. Why don't we watch it together? So she and I had this moment where we like completely, like it was the summer after 7th grade ended, and we completely demolished that miniseries, and we had to like take it out of the library like multiple times because we watched it like more than once. And like that memory of the BBC miniseries version has stayed with me. And every year I have reread Pride and Prejudice, and like it's nostalgia. It's like culturally relevant for me. The themes are culturally relevant for me. but it also has these universal themes and tropes that, like, you know, Austen is considered the grandmother or the godmother of the modern day romance, the contemporary romance, right? So like Austen has basically developed alpha male tropes in her books, and like that is, you know, what I immediately gravitated towards. That's what I like to write today, and that's like my first relationship with Austen. It was Pride and Prejudice was my first like connection. And in 2005, when they announced the movie, the Kiera Knightly version, I remember I had like a planner, like it was, you know, whatever, the Franklin Covey planners. And Franklin Covey planner, and I would like cross off the days to the release of the movie. And like it was still like AOL time or whatever. We were still on like AIM, and I would like message my friends like only one more week, and then like I got in my car and I went to see the movie myself. So it was me in a theater, like ditching school for the first time in my life, like sitting in a theater by myself, like with a bunch of like, you know, like soccer moms who just left their kid at school, who came and like watched Pride and Prejudice with me, with a giant tub of popcorn, just like bawling and just having a moment. So that was my relationship with like the second one. And I watched that in the theater 4 times.
Nice.
Wow.
That entire movie was having a moment. I think that's a great way to describe it. I just had moments throughout it. I was like feelings. So many
like
feelings.
I don't know about you guys, but like when that hand flexing scene happened, I was like in the theater, popcorn flags screaming.
Yeah.
So that is.
I love that. I mean, it just kind of shows how universal Austen is, and like, you know, 4 of us, and you know, so many other hundreds and thousands of people who love this book and this material. And I have this sort of quintessential, like, I read it when I was 12, probably 7th grade, with a bunch of other girls who we did a little book club, and that was one of the picks. And so I read it. I think it was an abridged version, which I didn't realize at the time, but then afterwards when I went back, I was like, oh, that was abridged. But you know what? It's okay, because it made me fall in love with Austen. And you know, and obviously I read it afterwards, and the complete version. And you know, I thought it was great. I just wanted to read more, and so I ended up reading her entire canon, and which I've talked about already on these things, so I won't go into. But basically, I just, you know, I think I saw the miniseries when it was on A&E, which is a channel that's now defunct. Yeah. Anyway, and I don't know.
I feel like they rebranded, maybe, but like it's a Discovery Network channel, so I feel like it still exists. I don't know.
Okay, it might, but it definitely doesn't play, you know, BBC miniseries
it's not what it used
anymore.
To
be. Yeah, and so anyway, I fell in love with the whole miniseries. I thought it was so, like, you know, just dramatizing all these different parts of the novel, and it was amazing. You know, it wasn't as amazing as Sense and Sensibility, Alexa, like we've talked about, you know, which is, you know, hard to beat. But the fact that it was so long, and you got like this total, you know, like almost everything is in that miniseries, the main points, and that I thought was really cool. And then I don't know, I don't have much of an origin story for 2005, but I remember being excited about it, and I remember also being slightly like disappointed by it. So I may be the only one of the 4 of us who doesn't particularly enjoy it, but that's okay. So anyway, what I wanted to ask everybody—
we like dissension. It's more fun.
I will say, my opinion actually changed on this rewatch. I like it more doing this rewatch than I have ever liked it in the past, and then I expected to like it, but I have a theory as to why. So
okay,
that isn't just pregnancy hormones, I promise.
Okay, we'll get there. So I wanted to ask the audience, those of you who are here and are excited, like, let us know which, I mean, some of you have already said in the comments, but which of the versions is your favorite, or is it both? And yeah, let us know, because I know this is a very sort of like contentious subject amongst Austen lovers. And yeah, the wet shirt version.
Yes.
Yeah, 95. Laurel says that the 95 version is called the wet t-shirt or the wet shirt version. Yeah, that makes sense.
Agree.
Oh, and also just a throwback question about my Germany story. I was a high school foreign exchange student, and because remember the Dark Ages when mail was slow? That's why. Because it took 3 weeks for anything to get to Germany. So that's the only reason. My host family got me gifts. I wasn't alone on my birthday.
Still does.
It still does. That's true.
My in-laws live in Germany, and it still takes forever.
It was a time. It was a time. It all worked out. If it were now, we would have live streamed over Skype and I would have been fine. But it was the Dark Ages and all we had was the telephone. So I'm so old. It's great. Okay.
All right. So let's go into, while people put up their preferences on the comments, let's go into the leads, because I guess we should do casting first, because I think that's sort of like the most contentious part of, the controversy between 95 and 2005. Part of it, like there's some other controversies we can go into, obviously. But yeah, so who's your guys' favorite of the, well, I guess we shouldn't say favorites. Why don't we just do, like, what do we think of Colin Firth versus Matthew McFadden? What do we think of Kiera Knightly versus Jennifer Ailey? I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Tobie, why don't you go first?
So, I mean, I think they all do a really good job. Like I said, I'm very, like, positive overall of both of these two versions. But, like, Colin Firth will forever be my Mr. Darcy. Like, I cannot change that or get it out of my head. Like, no one else will ever be Mr. Darcy in my brain. But, I mean, I do think, in general, like, both couples do a really good job. And I definitely feel the chemistry in both movies, which for me is almost more important. Because I do think, like, some of the Austens we've rewatched, like, over the course of this summer, I'm just like, Like, I get that they worked on the page, but I don't know if I really am seeing the chemistry, like, on the screen between these two actors at all, really. And for me, it makes a huge difference. So I do think I like both sets of Elizabeth and Darcy in both versions.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and didn't Colin Firth and Jennifer Ailey date?
They got
did
married,
they?
I thought they were married.
Were they married? I don't think she's his ex-wife, but I do believe they dated, so that would explain that chemistry.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Whereas Matthew McFadden is very happily married to his wife. I love her, and I'm suddenly blanking on her name. But they met on the set of Spooks, and that's how they got married. His wife, I love her, and I'm suddenly blanking. Oh, echo. They met on the set of Spooks. And why is that happening? Does someone have the window open? They met on the set of Spooks. Can someone? That's weird. Hold on. Is everyone hearing that?
Yeah,
I'm hearing it.
Okay,
Tobie,
stop.
do you have headphones, Tobie? I mean, I'm wondering if that might help too.
Normally that would happen if someone has the YouTube window open. That's why I asked. Anyway.
Oh, no.
But I want to just jump in and confirm they only dated for 1 year. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good to know.
Yeah,
no, I really, for me, I think, I don't know how you can beat Jennifer Ailey. I think Kiera Knightly has she does, I will say she does fine. I don't love that she's always like kind of laughing and giggling all the time, which is part of my problem with that movie, is that all the sisters are so over the top giggly and kind of annoying. And anyway, I'm sorry, guys. You can hate me. I'm sorry, but they just got on my nerves. And yeah, I don't know. So anyway, but going back to Kiera Knightly, I think Alexa, you probably have some strong opinions too. But I don't know. I'm not saying I think she's as the course of the movie went on, I eventually was like, okay, she's okay. She settled into it. But I think at the beginning of the movie, it was tough for me. And then, and then Colin Firth, it's hard to beat. But also, I think McFadden does an okay job as well. And for me, he just does a very kind of sad Darcy. Like he
That's
just
fair.
looked depressed.
He's my favorite.
Is he really? Yeah,
Yes.
no. I mean,
He's
like,
such a sad little introvert. I
He's
adore
very-
him. He's so awkward.
But like not in a bad way.
I prefer him personally, but that's partly because I have preferential. I have feelings. Anyway, it's fine.
okay. Well, so
But I
like,
agree with you on
I will
Kiera.
say, okay, I will say that like this time watching it, I haven't watched that movie. I think probably since like similar, like when it came out ish, because I had an issue with it back then, and then rewatching it, I thought to myself, now having seen him in other stuff, McFadden, I thought to myself, he's fine. Like, I don't think he's Colin Firth, but he's not bad. And like, I think he brings something different, and that's a good thing.
So I'll jump in.
Okay, yeah.
When when I watched the two, like the 1995 and then the Kiera Knightly version, like the BBC miniseries and the Kiera Knightly version, I think they're trying to accomplish two very different things when telling the story, right? So the BBC version is considered the most true to story rendering of adaptation. It has like a 98%, like, I don't know where I read this somewhere, but like 98% like true to story whatever. There's like only like 10 different differentiations that I don't know, like they show what's happening in the letter versus just her reading it.
Wet
like
shirt
that, right?
scene.
And the wet shirt scene,
bathing,
like Darcy, right?
It's
like,
all the sex. It's Andrew Davies. He likes that stuff.
Right. And the very beginning, which we can talk about too, where like they have the scene of Bingley and Darcy talking, which is also fabricated, but like perfect. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. No, but like so it is the most, I think, authentic retelling out of all of the adaptations, like over the course of whatever, and which is like why I think they were trying to like have a very like true to time period, like like emote true to the time period, right? Like, but I think the Kiera Knightly version, in my head, the way that I look at that version is it's everything that we feel Kiera Knightly or Lizzie Bennet is feeling, and we want out of a Mr. Darcy hero. Like I personally like didn't see him as sad, but I saw him as someone who's super uncomfortable with his feelings, and that was the only way I could justify in my head when reading the book, when watching any of the adaptations, that he was a jerk, like that he was just uncomfortable with his feelings, and he just made a mess of it, right? So the Kiera Knightly version to me is like this fire, like emotion-driven story that really gets to the heart of what we all like went through, like reading the story and understanding what the Pride and Prejudice tale was. Meanwhile, the BBC was trying to stick as close to the book as it possibly could to deliver to fans like what they saw on the page, on the screen. Mm-hmm. So because they like the Kiera Knightly and the Colin Firth versions, I think accomplish two or try to accomplish two different things. I think that like I like them for what they try to do equally, which is such a cop out. But like, I'll be honest with you, when 2005 came out, I was like, Colin Firth will always be Darcy, and there will be no other Darcy in this planet. But when I saw it, I was so shocked and so surprised. I'm like, I can get used to this because I'm putting this in a different category. So that is my take.
I went through the same transition. I was Die Hard, and then it's just they're very different. They're tonally very different. I feel 95 is very true comedically. It nails. Like I rewatching it the other day, I was laughing. It like they nail like the like class comedy and like. The 2005 isn't very funny. It's not really supposed to be funny, and thus it kind of loses the humor in that sense. But it is a raw romance. It's the emotions, and I think the casting exactly. They were going for very different things. I still, Tobie, perhaps we had similar feelings. Like I obviously love 2005, but Kiera on this current rewatch, I was more okay with her than I've ever been in the past. Because the one thing when I saw it in 2005. didn't love, it's not her fault. She just didn't feel like a Regency heroine to me. She still doesn't feel like a Regency heroine to me, but they're all a little modern. And we actually talked about that when we discussed Emma, how it's kind of how comfortable you are with how much they change it so that it feels amenable to modern audiences. And I definitely feel that that's what all current Austen adaptations do, the movies, because like, you're right, Kier's giggling. She feels like such a teenager, and it's a choice, and it's definitely not how the book feels. But I didn't mind it this time. But McFadden's my favorite Darcy. I adore him, and I want to marry him. So, yeah. Well, I loved him before this movie came out, because I was he on Spooks, and he also did this really weird like miniseries about like the messed up family. I loved him a lot before this came out.
Okay, yeah,
I'm a sucker.
I wonder if that contributes.
I loved Colin Firth too, but my first Colin Firth movie was Circle of Friends, and then I was so confused when I saw Pride and Prejudice. So.
Yeah, I think that does have an impact, because I think my first Colin Firth movie was the miniseries, so it kind of just cements it in your head. But no, I think for me, like the overall impression is just that. So when I first saw the 2005 version, I enjoyed it. It was like I thought I saw it in theaters, and I don't remember if it was when I was like, if I was a senior in high school and seeing it with my parents, or if I was a freshman in college and seeing it with my boyfriend, now husband. Like, I'm not sure which of those won out, depending on when in 2005 it was. But I remember seeing it in theaters, and it was like an enjoyable night at the movies. But it just didn't feel like my Pride and Prejudice, because I was so attached to the miniseries version by then, and I'd had this like wonderful experience with it. And I think that the thing is anytime I saw it up until this rewatch, I would generally watch it after having watched the miniseries, because it would be like, I love the miniseries. I feel like watching Pride and Prejudice. And then I would watch the miniseries because it was my favorite. And then I would be like, I still want to watch more Pride and Prejudice. So then I would watch the movie, right? So it always felt to me like Pride and Prejudice on speed. You know, like it's just so fast compared to the miniseries, and you lose so many details and you lose so much. It just always felt too fast. And that's kind of why I didn't like it. Like I felt like I was just rushing through the book. And this was the first time that I was like, I'm going to watch it first. And I watched it having not seen the miniseries in several years, and, just by itself for its own merit. And I liked it a lot more than I ever have before. And I mean, I do think the cinematography is superior. Like, frankly, it's just an absolutely beautiful movie. Like, it's just, every shot is just gorgeous, and you can tell how they orchestrated it. I love when she's like spinning on the swing. Like, everything was so beautifully chosen. The swans and the water and the lighting. Like, it's
and the
just
soundtrack.
the soundtrack. I mean, it's so beautiful. And so it's fun to like sit with it for 2 hours and just look at it. And there are select moments that I really love that I think are just fabulous. But I got to like appreciate the 2005 version on its own merits this time, probably for the first time ever. And I was like, this is perfectly well paced. What was I thinking? And then I watched the miniseries again, and I was like, nope, it's on speed. And I went kind of back to my former opinion. But I did enjoy it a lot more, just having watched it for its like own sake.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, what I did was this time, well, because inspired by you, Tobie, I had started the miniseries because it's my favorite, and then I decided, you know what, I should try and watch the movie. And so I ended up watching the movie in the middle, and of watching the other one, and yeah, it did feel like it was on speed almost. But I mean, obviously, so like the time constraint is an issue. I mean, we can't ignore that, and not to say that, just obviously I have, you have to have that in context in your head. If you're watching that one and you've seen the 95 version and you like it, I guess you have to have that in your head as you watch 2005, right? And that's fine. I just like, it's interesting the things they left out versus the things that they changed, I thought were interesting as well, because it's like, the dialogue is so, I don't know. I feel like the dialogue is quite good in that book. So it's interesting the scenes that they change the dialogue. I don't know what you guys thought, though.
I'm less of a purist, I think, than everyone
Yes.
else, but we've established that over multiple discussions. So I don't mind. And like, honestly, I've seen the 2005 movie so much that I can barely distinguish the difference in some places, which I know is terrible. Because like, for me, I'm the opposite of Tobie. My go-to Pride and Prejudice when I want those feelings, I watch the movie, because the movie for me is peak romance. I want to watch a romance in 2 hours that's going to make me swoon. Everyone in the comments keeps talking about the rain scene. Yeah, that proposal scene like makes me like shake. It is so intense. I can't even, like, watching it yesterday, I was like screaming in my apartment. And that's my default for that. But also just because I just don't always have 5 hours to watch the miniseries. Yeah. That said, I'll always make 3 hours of time for North and South. So I guess it's just, yeah. And actually, I have to say, my Pride and Prejudice miniseries feelings are complicated by my love for North and South, which I know is not Jane Austen, but North and South to me is the perfect BBC miniseries and kind of ruined Pride and Prejudice for me forever, which is not Pride and Prejudice's fault. It's 1995's fault. So our opinions change as we grow. And like adult me, 95 has some, I still enjoy it, but it also has some markers of mid-90s cheesiness. And actually, we've discussed it in some of the other ones too. Andrew Davies goes to like sexing up Austen every time. And it
works for me better in Pride and Prejudice than in other ones.
Well, and that's the thing. It's better in Pride and Prejudice than Sense and Sensibility. Like, that still makes no sense. But I'm like, watching it back, you gotta giggle at how often Colin Firth is wet. It's funny.
And it's
yes. So, okay, I will just, because we were doing this thing, I went and pulled this thing out of my library, which is the making of this miniseries. And like, they have Andrew Davies, talking about adapting the script. And I was right, because he says almost straight up, like, I thought a big part of this was, I'm obviously paraphrasing here. I could get out the direct quote, but I won't. Just that he clearly thought this is about sex, and he says it in a very kind of veiled way, but it's like, what is it? Okay, so like, for example, he was talking about the scene where Elizabeth comes to Netherfield and she's been walking, and the men are like, oh, her eyes were brightened by the exercise. And he was like, basically that means, you know how endorphins work, and like, so basically, like, women who exercise are more sexy, and that's why that's why it's appealing to these two men. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, I guess, but also it's clearly his sensibility is injecting this sex into it in some way or other. And not to say that I think it works here. I don't think it's over the top, but
I mean, there's a reason everyone loves the lake scene. Wet shirt Darcy, like, it's famous for a reason.
Yeah.
And it blew everyone's
had like a 98-foot statue they put in a lake in London to commemorate that scene.
Did they really?
And my only thought is that lake was really dirty. I wouldn't jump into it. But I don't like lakes, so.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. Like, yes, this version embraces the sex of the books more so than, another version might. But I feel like it works in a way that, like, they've tried to emulate it in so many other Austen adaptations since then, because that lake scene is like kind of so swoon-worthy and memorable for people, and it's fallen super flat. And I was trying to figure out, why does it work here? And is it just because I saw it when I was like 14? Right. Or, does it actually work better? And I think it legitimately works better because it highlights the meaning as opposed to just feeling kind of thrown in there for like the sake of sex, which I would be cool with, but like, sometimes falls flat. I like, for instance, the lake scene, it makes it so clear that he's at home here, like that this is actually his home, because we've been at this really grand estate, and we're seeing it through Lizzie's eyes. And we can talk more about that part later if anybody wants, because it's one of my favorite parts of the movie and the miniseries both. But like, we're seeing it through her eyes and Mr. and Mrs. Gardner's eyes and a housekeeper's eyes. And then all of a sudden, Darcy shows up and he's like, "It's my house. I'm gonna swim, right? I'm gonna like walk around in a wet shirt," because he lives there, and it feels more lived in. Like, and then it also highlights this awkwardness between when they meet, and like, it makes him more vulnerable, because otherwise she'd kind of be on his turf. But this way, she's on his turf. And he's like, in a wet shirt, and oh my goodness, you know, I was in the lake and I'm like out of sorts, and it kind of puts them on more even footing at a part in the book when they are on more even footing kind of for the first time. So I think it actually works for those reasons. And then the same thing with like the Lydia Wickham stuff. Like I remember understanding that dynamic and understanding what was going on as a 14 or 15-year-old so much better because they included those scenes that I had when it was kind of disconnected and like not on the page. So to me, that really works just because you kind of like her expressions and his expressions or the way they're looking at each other when they're, you know, in that that they're sharing or whatever that is in London hiding away, like you feel it so much more and you do get a sense of like the sex and that they've had it and what the meaning of that is and how that's already changing their relationship.
Oh, Lydia.
No, in such a, like, it's just such a stomach punch have if that wasn't there. Whereas like, you know, Jennieke knows I have feelings about the new Emma, but like, you know, whereas like when we just see like a butt in the new Emma, it's like, okay, there's a butt because they decided to stand somebody's butt, but like it doesn't really
nice
mean anything except it spoils the love interest for the horse movie, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about the more. I mean, I guess like I kind of hinted at this in my tweet today, but you know, we have the scene of him getting out of the pond, getting into the pond, getting out of the pond, and then, you know, him walking onto the estate and being very awkward because she's seeing him in
that is scandalous.
You know, basically undressed, a state of undress for which is completely scandalous, as you say. And so you get to, and then, but what's interesting, I think, is that they tried to emulate it again in the 2005 movie by, you know, having him walking out on the, I don't even know, it's not really a moor, it's just a field, I suppose.
It is.
Yeah, and with his shirt open, you know, whatever.
That was ridiculous, but I loved
so,
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. Obviously, it's kind of funny because it seems like they're harkening back to the miniseries, and you know, as we've said before, Alexa, like in these ones that get made subsequently, they seem to take things from the things that worked in the previous versions, which makes sense, but obviously, that was one of those things that they decided to put in the 2005 to some extent, without it being him in a pond, because I think that would have been just completely obvious and derivative.
Yeah.
So
we
like,
did get rain.
We did get rain.
Wet proposal.
The way that I look at Pride and Prejudice is, it's like, you have a main character, a heroine, who is fighting fate because she's afraid that fate is what society has established for her. And she doesn't want to be like following that, you know, societal dictate, right? She's not that kind of person. She wants to like make decisions that, you know, she feels like she has ownership of, you know, her future and her life, right? So I feel like with the 2005 version, like they took some of the like emotional like sexiness like you guys are talking about and brought it into that movie, and then they have like these throwback moments that like they've heightened in certain scenes. So I like got the BBC vibes in certain parts of the 2005 version because it is like building on the, you know, what came before. But like the 2005 version, I felt like it was like taking a grenade and like throwing it in, you know, and being like, let's blow up all these feelings. And like they had the hand flexing, they had the rain scene where he like his gaze drops to her mouth and then back up, and I'm like, oh,
it's so good.
Like lost my shit. And then
they are having like intercourse in that scene. It's just all with eyes.
It was all with eyes that he's like, gaze drops and like his voice lowers and he's like, I beg your pardon. It was just wonderful. And then you have that like scene at the end that was so silly that like they're, you know, Bingley's acting out this, you know, apology in front of the house. And
I love that scene. It's
adorable.
I love it so much.
It's these heightened moments where I felt like it was super restrained in the BBC version, even when like at the end she's like, she does that moment where she's like running, and like she just like needed a moment to like get it all out of herself, and like, you know, she runs, and then Darcy comes along, right? Like, and like that's a moment where she couldn't control herself. I feel like that's just like that's all of Kiera Knightly in 2005. So I don't know if that makes sense at
That's
all.
accurate.
Well, just because you bring up the proposal, I will say, so like, they're both A's for me. I just slightly prefer the 2005. I love the miniseries. However, the ending of 2005, they nail the tension and the feelings in both proposal scenes and marriages way better. Like because I was watching the miniseries again, I was like, oh, that was it? The ending really doesn't land for me in the miniseries, romantically speaking, compared to the 2005 movie, personally.
So, okay, so we're talking about the last proposal, the final proposal.
The final,
right?
like the basically like the end of both of them. I vastly prefer the movie from a romance perspective.
So I will say that this time around, I felt like the ending of 95 was, you know, it's not that super romantic, but it's also kind of what Austen does. I feel like they're trying, like, I went back and read the end of the book because I wanted to see what was there, and they literally pulled that dialogue from the book, which like they did for most of the miniseries. And so like even that line, which comes off to me like slightly awkward, the line he says, "Dearest, loveliest Elizabeth," almost like I don't know if you guys felt like it was slightly awkward this time. I kind of did. And it's in the book, like that's just there.
Awkward. And it's okay.
But he is awkward. So, I mean, I guess that's all right. You know, I don't know. Like, and then someone was telling me that the end of 2005 has two endings.
Different in the two countries.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Because British audiences, they didn't think they responded poorly to the hyper romantic ending. But then when they figured out they didn't get the same ending as Americans, they've corrected it definitely on streaming. But like, it's cheesy as heck. I can't help it. I like it. Like, I'm fine with not doing the ending from the book if I get that scene, as well as the scene in the mist. I'm fine with it all.
I'm just really happy both exist, because I feel like Alexa, I totally get why that's your go-to Pride and Prejudice, because if you're gonna watch it for like the
just for the
romance of it, like I agree that ending lands so much better, and it's so much more like, oh, I want to watch it. But like, having gone back, and because I remembered that there was controversy about that ending, and I was like, so what was the ending in the book? And I went and I reread like the last 2 chapters of Pride and Prejudice, and it's so close to the miniseries, where even you like see like Lady Catherine and her daughter being like in their lobby, and like we don't really need that. Does it like add to the end? No, but it's authentic to the novel. So like I'm kind of glad that both exist, because if I want to just kind of live in the novel, then the miniseries does that ending. They even have the double wedding, which is like implied in the book. And so, and kind of cheesy, but like it's in there. And so
it's classic. Like,
exactly.
And it's very 95, which works.
Exactly. And so like, I'm so glad that it's there, you know, like I like that both exist, but I also love the like getting swept away in the 2005 version.
We have this question here. Where does it end in the British version? It ends on Donald Sutherland basically saying, like, if anyone's here for Kitty and Mary, come on in. I am feeling very obliging. And it just ends. So it ends on, like, really one of the few comedic moments in the 2005 film. And that's where they just ended it in the British version. So
I will say I do love that scene. The scene with that you were mentioning about the Bingley and Darcy like practicing the proposal, where they go outside and they're like practicing, because first of all, it's adorable. Secondly, I think we don't see enough like positive representations of male friendship. I have a thing about it. Like I feel like in most movies and television shows, it's like something that's lacking. We don't see like good male friendship, like men being good friends to each other. And so I don't know, it's so endearing when we do see it. And that moment, especially being something from like 2005, where like, if anything, movies then were kind of the most guilty of this, I feel like, I don't know, it just stands out and it feels so special. And even though it's not in the book, it like fits them so well, because you want to know why they're friends. Like they are such good friends throughout this entire thing, and they do a lot for each other. And this is like proof that their friendship works. So I actually really love that moment. And since the miniseries is generally my favorite, I want to point out the moments in 2005 that I do actually really love.
Yeah. Oh, I think, Alexa, did you see Laurel's comment about the body and soul line?
Oh, I love
You have bewitched
that
me, body and
line
soul.
so
I'm sure you do. No, I don't think that's a problem. But like, I remember being really annoyed by it the first time I watched it, and then this
It
time
is
around,
ridiculous.
I
was like panty dropping.
I like it
that's
too.
what it was I was like, this is bananas. I want all of this right
See,
now.
it's so funny. Like, there's clearly like two schools of this. Like, you know, it's really funny.
It's such a ridiculous movie. And I mean, the same man made Anna Karenina. Are we really surprised that it's ridiculous? Because that movie is also ridiculous. Also, Kiera Knightly. If you haven't seen Joe Wright's Anna Karenina, it is ridiculous. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that particular line, I will just say, like, I made a note of it because I was like, it's not as bad as I remembered, but I still feel silly. But that's okay.
It definitely stands out. Whether it stands out to you as like a swoony thing, or it stands out to you as like a jarring thing, I could see both, because it definitely is one of those lines that sticks out.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we should talk about some people want us to talk about costumes, but I also wanted to talk about secondary characters. Which ones do you guys want to go for first?
Let's do secondary and then come around to costumes later.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot, like, they definitely do different things, which is interesting. They make different choices.
They absolutely do. So, yeah, secondary characters. I mean, like, let's go into Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, because I feel like the relationship, well, first of all, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are so different. I mean, Mr. Bennet is very different in each one. Mrs. Bennet, less so, I feel. But, sorry, I feel like the echo's back. Is it there? It's annoying.
A little.
Anyway. Yeah.
Oh, Collins. Yeah, we're going to come to Collins.
Yeah, we'll get there. Anyway, no, for me, it was very interesting to watch Donald Sutherland's Mr. Bennet again, because I had completely forgotten that he took a very, like, touchy-feely sort of path with it. Like, you know, he's hugging Mary after he...
I liked that, though.
I mean, it's very much more like an American, maybe North American kind of sensibility, I'd say, than a British of that time period. So that's sort of the disconnect for me.
Well, except everyone who worked on it is British.
I guess.
The screenwriter's British,
Donald
and so is
Sutherland
Joe
isn't.
Wright. He's not, but I thought it was beautiful how they humanized poor Mary. I thought Tallulah Riley was so sweet. So I actually liked that moment, because in the miniseries, he's so cruel to her. And it's something that Darcy is like, impropriety of your father. And I liked that little moment in 2005, but that's just me.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think...
Well, because it's also like because Mrs. Bennet's ridiculous. How the heck did they end up with Jane and Elizabeth not being train wrecks like Kitty and Lydia? So it's got to be Dad. So I kind of liked seeing that, like,
then Dad got tired and just gave up.
Exactly. He tried real hard with the first two and a little bit with the third, but she kind of went all the one way. So yeah.
And then
I relate to Mary, sadly, as much as I am also Lizzie. I'm boring like Mary, so no risk taking.
Well, I like the guilt-riddenness of Mr. Bennet in the miniseries. Like, he has that moment of gravitas, especially at the end, and they give him that moment in the movie, but it kind of flies by. It doesn't have the weight that it does in the miniseries, where you really see, like, he definitely takes responsibility and regrets the fact that, like, everything has happened with Lydia and what that's put the family through, and in general their financial state. Like, you see it affect him more, which then almost makes more sense why Jane and Elizabeth are the way they are. Like, you feel his intelligence more, as opposed to in the 2005 version, I'm supposed to know he's intelligent, so I kind of just know it, but you don't get that feedback of the guilt. And then, I don't know, I think for me it's a lot of Mrs. Bennet too, in that her lines get so swallowed up in 2005 because of the pacing, and that's fine. Like, it's necessary. They had to do it somewhere. But if you don't actually know her as a character and you're not already familiar with that dialogue, like, if you are, you can hear it in the background. But very often it's very much in the background and swallowed up while something else is going on. And so she doesn't feel as annoying. She's like way more sympathetic. And I mean, I see her side of it, having read the books. Like, she's right that her family's in trouble if these girls don't get married. Like, she has a valid point, but her personality comes through so much more in the miniseries. And then he plays off of that. So because they're like this pair, because she comes off as so much more sympathetic, he then comes off as like kind of so much more normal and less.
Wait, which one is she sympathetic in? Do you think?
I feel like in 2005, she's so much more sympathetic because so much of her like more abrasive dialogue gets swallowed up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's also Brenda Blethyn being just a very, all of the acting's more grounded in 2005. I think it's Brenda Blethyn, but also they removed all the humor. And I think that's the other reason they land very differently, because they are some of the best comedic relief characters. So like on the one hand, even reading the book, like I legit wonder, I'm like, how the heck did they raise like these 5 girls? I don't understand, but it's a comedy, so who cares? But the 2005 movie tries to be a lot more grounded. So you're right. But at the same time, she feels more human to me in 2005. But is that accurate to the novel? Not really.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think she's definitely more human in 2005, but I do think she's more accurate in the BBC version. But like, I think that, you know, Mr. Bennet, it has these moments of clarity in the 2005 version that I related to so much more and connected his portrayal so much more with the book. Like when Lizzie goes to him and is like, you cannot send Lydia. Like you cannot send her. Like she's gonna make a fool out of all of us. You don't know what Wickham is, right? Like there's a moment in the book where he basically brushes off, like Mr. Bennet brushes off Lizzie, and he's like, you know, she's never gonna rest until she like goes, and I really don't want to deal with it. And like, you know, in the miniseries version, like I didn't get as much of like his like disinterest in or his like exhaustion, like I have like way too many girls and like I just don't want to deal with this one right now. But like I felt it in the 2005 version in that one scene where like you can see it on Donald Sutherland's face, and he's like, you know, I just like, I get what you're saying, but like we just got to deal with this, right? And you know, like I think that's why I preferred him. Like if he had been given the opportunity of doing like the 6 hours of Pride and Prejudice, I feel like Donald Sutherland would have been like bananas good because he just, you know, hit it on like the tone and the acting, you know, there. But I agree that Mrs. Bennet is just a little bit more accurate and hits the comedic notes better in the BBC version. So that's my take on that. Yeah,
no, I feel like in the BBC version she's very I was telling Tobie this yesterday because we were talking about something else, and I was saying that I think she is so much more abrasive, and like you can tell that she's angry about so many little things, and just her life has not turned out the way she wanted it to, and she like clearly doesn't really care about most of her girls except for Jane because she's pretty and will probably make the best match, and Lydia, and like everyone else is just kind of like a wash, which is such a like a foreign kind of concept for us in this century, you know, time we live in, I think. But like I mean, not always, but in general. And like, so I thought that was interesting because not only is she amusing because of her nerves, it's also like she's like angry and unhappy at the same time, and like you can kind of see that there. But I think that's also a function of it just being longer and her having more to do in that one. And then for me, I guess Benjamin Whitrow is the name of the other Mr. Bennet in BBC version, and like for me, like I get more of his like irony in that, and I get more of the like. He's very much the disinterested father who, you know, like we said, cares about Jane and Elizabeth. The other 3, like he continuously calls them the silliest girls in England, and then doesn't do anything to change their behaviors, which obviously either he's given up or he just doesn't care anymore at that point, you know, which I think is, for me, is more true to Mr. Bennet in the novel, because he just kind of like, he eventually at the end does get really, he decides to take a hand with Kitty after the whole thing with Lydia goes down. And like, that's actually handled even more strongly in the novel than it is in either the mini or the movie. and like he literally like doesn't let Kitty go see Lydia anymore, and which I thought was really interesting because I didn't remember that. And so anyway, so when I saw that yesterday, I was like, oh, I guess he took a stronger stance on that than even I remembered. But that's obviously because we watch the movies enough that gets ingrained in our heads, I think.
Well, yeah, they even mention in the book, Jane Austen even mentions that like without Lydia's constant presence and like bad influence, Kitty improves because she starts spending time at like, you know, when she starts spending time with Jane and Bingley and Elizabeth and Darcy and like around other kinds of people, and she vastly improves. And they say that in the end, and I had kind of forgotten that. And also they say that like once the other girls are out of the house and nobody's constantly comparing Mary's looks to her more beautiful sisters, that she suddenly is okay. Like she feels better going to parties and she feels better going out into society a little bit. And you like, I feel like in both versions, you know, Kitty and Mary kind of fade into the background, like, but they do get a little bit more in the miniseries just because of time. Whereas in 2005, they're just kind of bodies. Like you see them a little bit, but they're not really developed, Kitty and Mary. And I feel like going back to the book kind of drove home to me that those are two very specific character types. Like they actually were very fully fleshed out characters in the book. They just didn't get a lot of page time, but I liked how Austen handled it in a way that I'd totally forgotten about.
But I do think 2005 had better casting.
Yes.
I remember both of them better, which helps that both of them have become very famous, but thus they were very well cast. I mean, you know, Carey Mulligan, and I mean, I'm very familiar with Tallulah Riley. I know not everyone is, but she was in Miss Trinians, and I was like, wait, you're really attractive. What happened? Because she was playing Mary, but like when you go back and watch it, her specifically, she's playing so much humanity in the background, which I really appreciate. Whereas original Mary, they were just like, she's got spots, and she's kind of, you know, harsh.
Like
again.
Have you guys ever read like Mary fan fiction where she like ends up with Collins, or like she like
well that would have been so
that
she really should have been with Collins.
But I always thought she should have ended up with Collins.
Yeah.
Like that's what Lost in Austin should have explored if it was
would
going
have
to
been
change
perfect
the story.
for both of them. They would have been
They're both
happy.
ridiculous.
Well, it's so funny in the miniseries. I was watching her reactions to when he would come around, and it like there's some scenes where there's one that's really sad where he is like talking about who he wants to have the first two dances with for the Netherfield ball, and he like kind of turns to her, and she's like, and he's like, Miss Elizabeth. It's so awful.
And they do it in the 2005 version too. They did it in both versions. Like the little, like Mary is like clearly like peeking at him around doors, and she's so into it, and it like breaks my heart because they would work so well together.
Poor girl. She's stuck in this ridiculous family. She's practicing her piano. She tries.
She tries so hard to do everything right.
Yeah.
She's trying harder to be accomplished than anyone else. So yeah.
That's true. There's actually a book I read that like a mainstream book that came out from a big publisher that was like a Mary Bennett. It was about Mary Bennett, and I can't remember what it's called now, but it's because it's been a while. But like, it was actually really good, and she like went on these adventures. She did, you know, it was still like keeping her as her character, but like she did stuff that was quite interesting. I liked it. Anyway, I wish I could remember the title. I'll maybe.
Yeah.
I agree with Violet in the comments though.
Yeah,
Violet in the comments says Collins is too shallow to want to be with Mary, which I think is very accurate.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree. I think he wanted to marry a pretty girl. Yeah. And as much as like Mrs. Bennett's cruel about Charlotte, she's probably not actually that plain. She was just negging her in favor of her beautiful daughters. Like I always got the impression Charlotte was fine. She just got a little old. Hashtag Team Charlotte.
And Charlotte's one of my favorite characters, not just in this book, but like ever. I just really love Charlotte as a character.
She's relatable in a very uncomfortable way the older you get. Like,
always right. Like she's the one who's right about everything in their whole society.
She's very sensible. She's saying to Elizabeth, she's like, Elizabeth, get it through your head how this works for girls. Like, I'm a burden to my family. I got to get out of Dodge. I want to run my own household. I'll just like have my own drawing room. Collins can go in the garden. It's great.
Jane needs to be more demonstrative with Bingley.
She was so right.
Dude.
Yeah, that was right.
It's true. Yeah. So.
I like remember when I used to, like every year when I read Pride and Prejudice in my 20s, like I would like cringe and like hate her more and more just because like she was like the voice of reason and I didn't want to hear it like in my 20s, like when my parents would say the same thing, like, listen, you gotta get married. And I'd be like, don't be like Charlotte. Like, I hate this. But yes, Charlotte definitely is considered like a character that provides like a historical context for a lot of the stuff that's happening in society at the time. So she definitely like has multiple hats in the story, but it's uncomfortable how right she is.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that the book has endured and so easy to understand for modern readers, because you do have Charlotte being like, this is how it is. And so as a modern reader, we can be like, oh, that's how it was. And so if you're 14, 15 reading this book and Lizzie doesn't seem that innovative and outrageous from a, like modern a 2000 plus, then, you see Charlotte and it's much easier to kind of grasp why Lizzie is so innovative. And in that regard, she's kind of like a perfect foil. Like we were talking about alpha male tropes, and so many things come from these books. And Charlotte as a foil for Lizzie she's perfect. She's just perfect.
Yeah. The whole family really is concerning. Even with the two eldest daughters married off and Lydia off, I'm still concerned about the Bennets. Collins is going to throw them on their asses. Like, let's hope that Mr. Bennet lives a long time.
Well, I feel like Charlotte's not going to let that happen.
I don't know. Collins is pretty ridiculous. It depends on whether or not what's her face is dead. Rosings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what about so we've talked about, what about Lydia? I guess we should, and Wickham, we should probably.
Oh, Lydia.
Lydia, right? So like, oh, wow.
I think she's perfect in 95. Julia Swahala is perfect.
She is. And I love Jenna Malone as an actress. Like,
it's just not the same. Yeah. She's good for what
she is good.
It is, but 95 all the way. Yeah. Like, she nails her ridiculousness. I love because that's the one where like she goes into the hallway in her stays and she runs into Collins and she like holds up her thing and giggles. I love that.
I know.
Yeah, that's cute.
Yeah.
No, and
she does. Honestly, she just seems less intelligent in the 1995 version. Like she just seems it's more accurate.
And she contrasts and plays off of that Mrs. Bennet so perfectly. They're both comedic, ridiculous characters, and they so good.
And for me, the fact that she is also playing the character as not very intelligent keeps it from being like pure slut shaming from a 2020 standpoint. Because
she's a moron, but she fully believes what she believes.
Because I do feel like when I was watching this, in the early 2000s, in a high school classroom at an all-girls Catholic school, like there was definitely an element of like Lydia as a cautionary tale, right? To the way that this book is very often taught to girls in high school. And I feel like that has to be addressed. And so I was kind of prepared to like watch this and have some kind of new revelation or like new sympathy for Lydia or something. And I do a little bit when I remember she's 15, but she's just so awful in the 1995 version that I can still be on board with like her kind of doing something and having it go south, and where she really had all of this, every reason to not do it or not do it that way, right? Because I was fully prepared to be like, am I going to be like angry 2020 feminist Tobie about this and think like this is slut shamey and it's not like I like Lydia and sympathize with her so much more than I did as a teenager. And I didn't. I watched it and I was like, nope, I still have the same feelings that I had in high school. But I was prepared, but it didn't happen.
She's a moron who did not understand how she almost ruined her family. And just the gloating when she's married. Oh, get married. Oh, she's the worst. I love it though.
Too much. It was too. I was like when I read it the first time, I was like, ugh, this is the kind of girl that I like hate and I don't want to talk to at recess. And then when I read it recently, I was like, ugh, this is the kind of like girl that I don't want my own kids to talk to at recess.
Like the thing is, we still know women who are like that, where it's like the gloating. Lydia is a narcissist. She's not a smart narcissist.
Everything else define her too, in a way that I understand makes sense for the time period, but in a way that Lizzie is not, and Elizabeth and Jane is not, and she's also again it's this selfishness with her family and like with this, like just not being aware of how everything affects everybody else. Whereas every other character, even when Lizzie turns down Mr. Collins or Mr. Darcy, she's aware of what she's doing. She knows how great it would be for her family if she said yes. And she has that inner conflict. And then she's almost like bravely going against that because she's putting herself first in a time when you didn't really have that kind of individualism. And so it feels brave. Whereas with Lydia, it just feels selfish because she doesn't even, it doesn't occur to her. She's just so oblivious.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting in 95 how they set up in the very first episode that she has horrible manners. Like they're at the party at I think it's at Lucas Lodge or something, and like she's just being like a brat in a house that's not even her house, and like trying to, you know, like telling people what to do and getting people to dance, even though, again, it's not her house and it's not her place to say probably anything. And, you know, it's like, it's the beginning. And then it just goes obviously downhill from there. And it is amazing at the end when she's like, no, you must go lower than me. I'm married. And it's like, okay, but how did you get married, you silly girl?
She'll never see it, though. No. She basically, I feel like she is the future, like Sense and Sensibility, the Norrises. Like I imagine, like, not that we like Wickham and we like Hugh Laurie, I forget his character's name, but like
the Palmers.
Palmers. In 10 years. What a miserable pair. I mean, he's miserable now, but she can't see it yet, but I think she'll see it eventually. And she'll understand at some point that her husband hates her.
And they do foreshadowing that in the miniseries by showing them in bed together at the end, and he's like already just so like bored and drinking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he's the worst.
I mean, he is the worst.
Like, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Like in the book, like at the end when like Austen does her like summary of where everyone ends up, like there's even like a part where like, you know, they talk about how like she's already asking for money, right? And she's like, you know, she like is already like unhappy basically in a weird way, but like because it's not enough, like what she has is no longer enough anymore.
Well, she had a fantasy of what it would be, and she lives in her fantasies, not in the real world.
And that Wickham gets sick of her very quickly, if he wasn't already sick of her to begin with, which is so strange. I mean, I was trying to figure out why he even decided to run away with her. So I had to go back to the book for that, because I was like, why would you waste your time? Like, if you didn't want to marry her in the first place, fine, but why would you like kind of abduct her / run away with her and then just like go hole up in London just to live together unmarried in a way that wouldn't make a difference nowadays, but clearly makes a big difference in the 1800s. And that would not only scandalize her, but her entire family. I don't know. Obviously he doesn't care about much beyond himself.
Given his end game was money, it is a curious decision, because he couldn't have known that Darcy would give him his money.
And obviously he knows that, and he knows that the Bennets don't have a lot of money. And wouldn't be, even if they wanted to pay him to marry her, couldn't pay him that much. So it's very strange and just kind of, but what I went and saw what I did see in the book was some line about Elizabeth's assumptions being correct about him, which was that he just was like, he had his debts were so heavy in Brighton that he needed to leave anyway, and therefore wanted a companion. So he brought Lydia along.
Oh,
and
that makes sense.
But isn't that like this? It's still super
but
strange.
It makes more sense than not knowing. Like now that you pointed out is this giant question mark, I like that there's at least some semblance of a response.
Of an answer.
Although I do think it's strange because they mentioned that he was like toying with a bunch of shopkeepers' daughters and stuff like that, which is awful, especially when we kind of think about it from a modern context. But if that were the case, then he clearly was like getting some. Like, I don't know why he needed Lydia. It is a little weird, though.
I honestly think maybe he just likes young girls. I think he might be a pervert. Maybe.
Yeah, because Georgiana, because they're the same age.
They're both 15. I don't know.
Yes, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up, is that he's constantly going after young girls, and beyond that, beyond the fact that he's a creep, like, let us remember that the Bennet parents have let Lydia and Kitty just run wild with these grown men officers and like don't seem to think that there's any threat there. I think that's also an interesting point. It's like, that's neglect in some kind of neglect.
Yeah. Honestly, I know we're not supposed to be team Lady Catherine de Bourgh. However, when she was shocked that all the sisters were out, I was kind of on her side. I was like, that is mildly shocking that the 15-year-old is out when her sisters are not, like...
Well, because it seems that there's no proper parental supervision.
Yeah, they're honestly, the Bennets, I'm not positive they're good parents.
They're not particularly.
I think Jane and Lizzie are a fluke / narrative convenience almost. We love Jane, but she took some liberties, I believe.
I definitely.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, I agree. I think, and if you look at the two different movies, like the balls are definitely a place where you can see those family dynamics. Like the 2005 version, of course, has just like very small snippets of like, you know, seeing everyone like kind of interact. But that montage scene where you see like the camera goes from room to room to room and you see like Mrs. Bennet like saying, oh yeah, the wedding's going to be happening soon. And then you see like Mary playing on the piano and everyone like trying not to listen and the dad having to shut the piano. And then like you see like Lydia like giggling and running all over the place and like just going around, like you see all of their strangely terrible interactions, and then like Lizzie just leaning against the wall in the 2005 version and just like in like a separate room just going like, oh my god. And I like thought about it at that time. I was like, oh my god, like this is pretty awful. Like these guys are pretty awful. Like these Bennets, like the parents are, you know, and it's the ball like definitely show it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even in both versions, I mean, even in the other one, there's like it's not a montage so much as just like everyone doing horrible things in one, you know, like in one scene, you know, each of the Bennets other than Jane and Elizabeth doing something ridiculous. And it's just like, oh man, they are super embarrassing. And can you, I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, not really, but like, it's interesting to imagine someone in a family such as that, where you're like constantly going into society and being embarrassed by your family members. And again, just showing the difference between her family versus Darcy's family versus the Bingleys. And not to say that all the Bingleys are great, as we absolutely know they are not. And we probably should talk about them too.
Yeah.
That's true. The Lucases too.
Lucases
even they're slightly more...
A little ridiculous, but pretty normal. Charlotte's very thoughtful, and the sister's not in 2005, but she's silly in the way a young girl is, but nothing. She's not Lydia.
Yeah,
so. Right. Yeah.
She at least respects Lady
Catherine. And the father likes to talk, but that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she very much.
She's coming, Lady Catherine.
Well, am I
like when she like repacks her bag, her trunks because Lady Catherine told her to.
I know. Well, am I remembering right, or wasn't their father like only recently knighted, or like he's only recently a gentleman? So they're kind of more of like a new money family. So maybe they have more of an appreciation of, you know, how quickly things can change and what the social hierarchies are and how lucky they are to be where they are. Like, I feel like they maybe have more of a sense of, like, as we would say now, their own privilege than most people in the book. And maybe that's why their family feels a little more grounded and especially a little more realistic.
Definitely. I think that's fair. Yeah.
Do we want to talk about Wickhams?
Oh, yeah. That's where we're going. So, okay, I don't know if you may disagree, but in 2005, he is there for 2 scenes or 3 total, I think. And like so there's one scene where she meets him in that shop, and then the other scene where they're talking and she's sitting under a tree and he basically tells his whole life story to her on the same day they meet. And I was like, why would she believe this guy? She does not know him. And then just that she'd like,
well, I just like I think part of why she believes him so quickly is because she's looking for anything to kind of validate her
true,
dislike for Darcy, right? But yeah,
Opinion of Darcy, sure, but I
I
I
do.
just don't know if
agree
I
with
would believe it the same day you met the guy.
It's on speed. Like it's on speed.
Yeah. I do think Wickham thus is one of the weaker links in 2005, both because I think Rupert Friend, is way too pretty. He's so pretty, it's unfortunate and distracting. I was like, why are you... Yeah, I'm like, you're really pretty. And then he's next to Kiera, who's also a little too pretty for the movie. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But yeah, completely underdeveloped. You don't get a sense of the timeline, which obviously you get more in the mini. Like, he's there consistently in their social circles over a period of time. And he and Lizzie have like a slow build, and there's a reason. But it is what it is. I'm just here for McFadden, so it's fine. But yeah, 95, I think, does it just better across the board.
Well, and you also get the Miss King subplot, the idea, like, and there's that whole thing about, handsome men must live off something as well as the plain ones, right? And it kind of takes that dynamic that we've only really seen with the female characters and applies it to Wickham. So for like at least that beat, we kind of get his humanity and we see his side of things, and it adds like in kind of an interesting perspective. I mean, then it all, goes away because we just don't care about Wickham and he becomes such a cad. But like for that little bit, you kind of see Lizzie being understanding to somebody who's in a situation that's largely the same as hers, but he's making a different choice. And I don't know, I missed that beat in the 2005 version, but obviously I understand why it can't be there.
Yeah.
And as much as like I like both of them because they accomplish two different things, and like the high like emotional context of the 2005 version, I do agree that Wickham is definitely the weaker link in that one because, like, first of all, he has one expression throughout the entire movie, like one expression, and I'm like, okay, well, you're upset all the time.
Yeah, slightly startled pretty man.
Like, but I feel like the BBC version of Wickham definitely, like, you can as a viewer like see the insidiousness like kind of spread from his personality a little bit better. It builds, and also how like Lizzie, who's incredibly intelligent, is buys into it. And that slow build happens in the book. So like, because the BBC version of course has more time and space and is a more truer adaptation, you do get that more. But like, yeah, like I feel like 2005 could have done a little bit of a better job with their casting choice, with the acting, and maybe even adding like an additional scene in between.
One scene, maybe.
Just one more scene,
yeah.
And I do remember, watching this, like I said, with a whole group of like 14-year-old girls, like in stages where none of us knew what was going to happen. None of us knew, what Wickham was going to become. And watching it and us all being like, oh, she met a cute boy, and Lizzie likes him, and he's so nice to her, and Darcy's so mean to her, and how come we're supposed to like Darcy? And, like that whole journey and taking that with Lizzie, and it works very well.
I mean, it's so good in the book. Oh, so good. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think we're all in agreement on Wickham. Who else do we? Okay, I guess we could talk about Lady Catherine or the Gardeners, or the Bingley.
I love the Gardeners.
Sort of a gem.
Yeah, the Gardeners are good
cute,
in both. I'm partial to 2005 because I'm like, I love Penelope Wilton. She's just so sweet and cuddly. And then the Mr. Gardner, I want to say he's an Irish actor. Like, I feel like I've seen him in other stuff. So I just like them because they're familiar to me. So, yeah.
I like that. I like how much her Aunt Gardner gets to, like, you see her being more perceptive and seeing Lizzie's feelings in the 1995 one. I feel like that's so fun. Mm-hmm. And then just because you get more of them, simply just the timing and, again, the pacing, you get so much more of them. And what I really like is, actually, I was looking again at the book at the ending, and the very, very, very end of the book is about the last line is about the Gardeners, and I think the thing is they're so important. Yeah. It says Darcy as well as Elizabeth really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude towards the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them. And that's literally like the very last line of the book. And so to me, I like that they have more weight because I think they're super important to Darcy's character arc. Like, because he really does, you know, he is really prideful and really conceited, and he isn't looking at people who, you know, are in trade and have, like, you know, are below his his station. For most of the book, he is looking at them as beneath him. And then when he starts treating the gardeners differently, it's kind of the turning point of, like, both his whole arc, and then also, like, Elizabeth taking him more seriously. And so I just like that you get more of that, because I do think it's actually really important.
I personally like the casting choice of the 2005 version, but I do think that, like, you have a little bit more, like, of the build and the relationship closeness in the 1995, like the BBC version. But, like, in the 2005 version, when, like, Mrs. Gardner's like, there's something pleasing about his mouth, like, I was like, I was just like, so wonderful for some reason. I was like, this is like something like a rogue aunt would say. And I just like love them, and the way that they just, you know, like try to, like, pull Lizzie along on an adventure that they thought was an adventure. But I agree, like, in 1995 you do have, like, you know, a more solid understanding of their relationship and their role in Lizzie's life, which I think is, you know, super important.
Yeah.
And I love the housekeeper in the 95 version. Because, again, I understand I can't get that much time in the 2005 version, but I love because you see Darcy through her eyes, you know, and she's almost like, she's like the closest to a mother figure that we see. And she clearly, like, loves him so much. And it's and it's, again, another turning point for Elizabeth, because I don't know, we were saying, you know, like that whole Pemberley part where they, you know, they going to Pemberley, and I think it's done so well in both films for different, or both versions for different reasons, but it's definitely my favorite part, maybe other than the swoony parts of both versions, is like them going to Pemberley, and they both did it so well in different ways. And for me, part of what adds to it are the gardeners and a housekeeper in the 95 version.
Yeah, I mean, I love those. Go ahead.
Oh no, there you go.
Oh, I was gonna like say, transition into talking about the Pemberley scene, because it is kind of it's definitely a pivotal scene in the book and the movies, because, you know, it changes Lizzie's perspective on him, for basically. And so I think they both are handled pretty well. I think it's funny to see in the movie his the sculpture of his head, I think, is quite funny.
What I was going to say is that I find I'm not a fan of that. I prefer the portraits because I find it cringe. The bust.
Me too.
And the sculpture garden, I was like, I guess.
Well, I feel like what they were I feel like what they were trying to do in 2005, and I could be wrong about this, it's just kind of my interpretation, but I think it has to be made clear in both versions that it's not just like, he has a really great house, now I like him, right? And that's a part of it, right? But to make it amenable to modern viewers, they have to do something to make it very clear that it's not just like, big house, now I'm on board, check, right? And
but
so
it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
She has some especially in 95, they show, like, when the house comes into view, she has some feelings about it.
Yeah. No, I know. And that's the best reveal of the house maybe ever. Like, I love that reveal in the 1995 version when they come around the tree and
I did like Kiera Knightly's, like, snort laugh to herself of, like, oh no, what did I do?
And I do like that both of them address that component and they're honest about it. But I do think there's more, like, they have to add more to it. So I feel like they added the sculpture scene, which is, again, a big shift, to almost make it, like, feel cultural. Like, oh, it's that, like, Lizzie's more maybe educated and appreciates culture more than her, like, the rest of her family, and she feels, like, out of place. And the sculpture garden, or the sculpture room, I guess, makes it almost more, like, elevated culturally, where, like, she has this appreciation for art, and that resonates. Like, it has this vibe of, like, almost a pretentious cultural appreciation that she shares with Darcy, as opposed to just, like, pretty house. And I think that they were trying to do that visually because they didn't have time to do it in dialogue as much. Whereas, like, the other version, you know, they can talk about the woods and how Lizzie loves nature, and they can hit the part with the housekeeper, and they can hit the part with the gardeners have more heavily. And there's just more pieces that they can hit. But because they didn't have that time, I feel like they used the statues as, like, a set piece for that, to do it faster. And it's debatable whether that works, but I feel like that's maybe what they were trying to do.
It's possible. I don't know. That's an interesting perspective, Tobie. I wouldn't have thought of that. I think they actually, my perspective on this is that at Chatsworth, which is where they filmed that particular Pemberley, which, and I've been there after the movie was made. They have that sculpture room, and so I feel like maybe they thought to themselves, let's just use what's at Chatsworth, which is a room of sculptures, and then let's just build one of his head and stick it in there, and like. And that one of McFadden was in there when I was at Chatsworth. I mean, this was years ago, but like, I think they still have it there, probably to have the connection to the movie.
Yeah,
if I were an
Right, it's
actor, I'd be
weird.
like, ooh.
It's pretty amusing.
like there's a
So
9-foot statue in a lake of me. Like,
That's true. That's true. Future cultures
Anyway.
will find that and be like, this is it's a Greek god. And it'll be really awkward and cringe.
I don't know. So let's see. What else we're gonna talk about? Oh, maybe we should talk about the first proposal. Oh, you know what we should do? Let's talk about hair and costumes now. Oh, unless you have an idea.
First, there were opinions earlier about Jane. I feel like people have feelings about Jane. And I do as well. So I'll go first. Okay.
Go for it.
I vastly prefer Rosamund Pike. And it actually, for me, wasn't until 2005. It's probably just because I'm such not a Jane. I never really understood her as a character until the 2005 movie. I thought Rosamund played her beautifully. And it's also, in fairness, that they gave her more moments. Like, showing her acceptance in the proposal scene was I just thought that was beautifully executed. Meaning, like, not that I don't understand what it is to be a quiet girl, but I just didn't understand Jane, particularly not in the 95. Like, the actors did what she could, but she's so blank and not in a good way. Whereas I just think Rosamund Pike, like, kicked ass at it. And then she became Amazing Amy. She's got range. So, yeah. Also, fun fact, Joe Wright and Rosamund Pike fell in love on this movie and hooked up, but then it didn't last. So, yeah. That's just my trivia for you. So he was in love with her, and I think you can tell with how he lenses her. That's my opinion. Because she's beautiful and perfect. So,
I mean, I prefer her as well in terms like of casting, and I think it's because I felt like she was like naturally quiet, so it just felt more natural for her. Like in the BBC version, I felt like the Jane that they had was constantly trying to like downcast her eyes, and it just felt unnatural, like in her like the style that she was using to portray Jane. And you're right, like it in the book, like Jane was had a little bit more color and a little bit more depth that only Lizzie could see and could like be privy to, and it came across better, I think, in 2005 than it did in the BBC version. Even though BBC had so much more space and like ability to like showcase her as a character. So I am definitely with you on that, Alexa.
Yeah. Just with all due respect to the actress, I don't think she's as talented as some of the other 95 actors in terms of depth.
And I do think just because of that, you see the sister bond in 2005 between the two of them so well. Like that is one of the things that, even though, it is very, it moves at a much quicker clip. The 2005 version really does hit the sister relationship really well, I felt like. And that's largely because of both of those actresses and their dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I have a big preference of one over the other. I think they both do their jobs quite adequately well, and I like them both. So I don't have a whole lot more on that. I do think Mr. Bingley, though, I do have strong opinions about Mr. Bingley, because I do not like the 2005 guy, because he seems very stupid. He comes off as like, I'm sorry, you guys are going to hate me for this, but like at the beginning, he comes off like as a bumbling kind of fellow who doesn't have a lot going for him. And I don't know if it's just because he's like not articulate. He's I don't know. I don't have anything against that actor because I think he's quite funny, and I like the humor that he injects into that movie. And I think he's one of the few people who does. But yeah, no. For me, it's I don't know, not my fave.
I don't have strong opinions about him personally.
To me, both of them hit really similar notes. Like they both feel like very similar Bingleys.
Yeah, they're very they're puppy dogs.
Yeah.
Not sad puppy dogs though. They're happy puppy dogs. They're golden retrievers.
I agree. I do think they do hit similar notes, which is why, like, I don't think, it's uncommon for a lot of people to not have strong feelings about either one of them. I prefer the 2005 one just because, I just thinking about the, elites, the upper echelon of the time, you're going to have those, bumbling idiots who basically were spoon-fed since birth, and he reminded me of one of those I've always been rich and all I do is go hunting and go to parties and I just happen to be really sweet about it, and my sister got all the sass.
Oh, my sister. Oh, she's a piece of work.
And I felt like it was a really good pairing for the Jane casting in 2005. I just didn't think that the casting couple in the BBC was as effective in my head. So so I have to say I think that's why I like him. Just because he's the different type of aristocracy that I know exists, but and kind of comes through in the book. But you really see it.
But I see what Jennieke means about I think maybe what it is for you, because I have no problem with them in 2005, but maybe what it is that because they took out so much of the comedic moments from so many other characters, they inserted a lot of that with Bingley in 2005 that's not there in 1995 because you have those other supporting cast members to be comedic. So maybe that's what just didn't gel for you, was him as a comedic character, kind of. Because I think they intend bumbling to be funny, but if you don't really find it funny, then it's just not going to hit for you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very possibly. And then, so can we talk about Collins too? I mean, people are talking about him a bit in the comments, but I do think the two Mr. Collinses are very different, because the Mr. Collins in 95, he's this obsequious, very kind of, I don't know. It's not like he's dumb, but he's very, I don't know. I guess he's just obsequious.
Limited.
Right?
He's limited.
Okay.
I think they're both perfect for their respective movies. And that's the thing, I've tried to compare them and I'm tonally different. I love them both in completely different ways, personally.
Yeah, that works. I mean, I think the guy in what's it, Tom Hollander?
Tom Hollander, yeah.
Okay. His Mr. Collins to me feels super creepy.
Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a choice, obviously. Yeah. And I don't know if, and I feel like that portrayal probably informed the Lost in Austen portrayal of Mr. Collins, where he's a super creep.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting interpretation. It definitely, because again, 2005 was trying to be very grounded. It definitely grounds him as a certain type of character, that he's slimy in a very particular way. And I can completely see it. And he's less idiotic and more vaguely malicious. I don't know. I like them both, especially when you pair him with Judi Dench, who is a badass bitch.
Oh,
she is great. Hard. I mean, I love it. But I love them both of the Lady Catherines. They work in very different ways, and they fit the tone of their respective adaptation. Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So I seem
definitely agree.
I saw the 2005 Collins in I don't know what movie he was in, but he was a terrible villain, and it scared the hell out of me.
He's a good villain.
I will always prefer the 1995 Collins.
I just love this. I love that he's constantly, in 1995, he constantly cuts himself off from talking when de Burgh is talking by going like this. Oh yeah, I laugh every time. I can't.
Well, again, it's a pitch perfect comedic adaptation. Exactly. He nails it. Yeah. And he nails the ridiculousness of Collins. And that's very true to the novel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see.
Costumes and hair?
Yeah, so let's do Yes, I was going to say, because I think that's the last thing on my list, more or less. So I guess we should ask the audience which they prefer, or if they like both, because it's definitely possible to like both. Why don't we start with you, Nisha? You go first on this one.
So in terms of costumes and hair, I think that the 2005 version tried a little bit to be like more, I think like I saw a documentary about it. Like they tried to be as accurate as they possibly could with like the like cast, like with the like financial level of each of the families. And the 2005 version, I'm sorry, the 1995 version, like I get it, like okay, fine, like there are parts of it that were super accurate, but it was very clean. I felt like it was very, like, is that just me? But like I felt like everyone's clothes were super clean. Everyone looked super shiny.
It's the truth of the houses too. It's in the set design. Yeah, it's I totally agree with you.
It was clean. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Like it's BBC, you gotta like this is what they're working with. This is what they got. Like they're not going to try to make it like as authentic by like having her like swing on a swing in the middle of like a pig, pen. But it just it like out of both of them, I think that, like I said, like because they serve different purposes, I think the BBC one makes sense for the way that everyone's acting, the way that they've like set up the story, the way that they have the characters like cast. And like Alexa mentioned, like the more true to like money and setting just makes more sense in the 2005 version. Like there's that scene where she's in her dressing gown though into the 2005 one, and he drops off the letter, and I was like, I don't know how accurate this is though, because I don't know if he would be like in her bedchamber.
That did throw me.
I was like, this may not be right.
But it was beautifully rendered.
But it was so good because she's like heartbroken, and she's like, and he's like disheveled, and it was great. But also, that's probably not that accurate either.
Yeah.
So I don't know what my answer really is, but like I think it makes sense.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, can we talk? Violet Claire has a comment about Miss Bingley's sleeveless dress in 2005, and can I just say I hate it? Like it's like this. It's so ridiculous, and like it's a column of white and like tank top. It just made me mad. But anyway, like, and the rest of the costumes. Like it's fine. Most of it's fine, except for I just hate that they keep putting Lizzie in brown all the time. That just annoys me. Like, why not some color? It's
She's
clearly
of
the
the
aesthetic
earth, Jennieke.
I know.
The whole movie is doing heavy nature theming. That's why. And I will confess, it does bug me because it's not as pretty as I'd like it to be. And I think that's where that feeling. I get it, but I like them both. I agree with Nisha. 95 is a little too clean, but it's also painfully accurate, and I really appreciate that. Like all of the clothes are very clearly accurate. The hair, they nail the hair. 2005 is accurate in a completely different way. I like that you can tell that people who have less money wear older fashion. I did notice that with Mrs. Bennet. They did a good job. I think they showed class. They showed class not, I wouldn't say in a better way, but in a different way. You could still see it in 95 in a very clear way. 2005, I wondered about the brown dresses too. I was really curious about the lack of color. And the hair was a tragedy. Across the board, I thought the hair was pretty bad in 2005, but I go with it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I just have to bring up the pigtails on Kitty and Lydia in the first ball scene because it's ridiculous, and I have to bring up the ponytail on Lydia in another scene. It's just I was like, "What are you doing?" And then anyway, and I know Alexa, you and I have complained about hair on all this whole series, so I just have to bring that up because
I think 95 nailed it. It helps. I did watch a YouTube video by a costumer who said that they nailed it. I was like, okay, thank you for confirming, because they had like the weird dog frontal things. I was like, well, it looks accurate because it's pretty awkward. So, and also,
My husband came in and said they look like King Charles Spaniels, and I was like, yes,
and they
you're
nailed it.
absolutely right, they do.
2005 tried way less hard. Like Kiera, her hair was not good. It was not good.
No, I know.
I think someone said in the comments she had like a wig on, right? Because
it wasn't
her hair at that time.
And I do feel like they were trying to deliberately make her look messy. I think they're also very aware of how beautiful she is and the fact that Jane is supposed to be prettier. And so they were, maybe that was what all the brown was about. Like, I'm not sure. Because she's just so almost distractingly beautiful that, like, I think they were trying to tone it down. But, like, then
that's always been my
cast, like, that you don't need to just put her in a bunch of like drab colors.
That's always been my one. I said in the beginning, my problem with Kiera Knightly, she's too much of a modern beauty, and it throws me off. Even though I've warmed to her performances, now I'm older, but like 21-year-old me really did not like her as Lizzie because she wasn't Lizzie to me. And I do think Jennifer Ayla is better. But because the one thing, and I'm really curious, I should watch the making of again, what her undergarments look like, because I feel like they're the wrong undergarments, because Kiera Knightly's silhouette feels wrong in 2005. I'm like, are you wearing stays? Like, and it's partly that Kiera has a very modern body, and I hesitate to, like, even at 21, I was like, I don't want to body shame Kiera Knightly. But like comparatively, she has such a modern body. And I feel like they didn't put her in support garments so that she would look Regency.
Yeah.
She does not have a Regency silhouette. And that is my one thing where she will never completely feel like Lizzie Bennet to me. So that's my one thing I don't like about the movie.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think they had the same issue with Gwyneth Paltrow for Emma, which was, you know, the chest issue. I'm like, but somehow they managed to pull it off there, whereas this one does not at all.
They didn't even, I feel like they didn't even try to give her a Regency silhouette. And I think that's what we're all bucking up against with Lizzie's costumes. And that's the thing, the drab brown dresses did not help.
No.
Yeah. And one thing I really like about the 2005 version overall is that grittiness and that realism of, like, you can really tell who the rich characters are, and you can really tell that there's a difference between, like, the, you know, Miss Bingley and the Bennet sisters, just in terms of how they're dressed. And when they dress up for the balls, they really feel dressed up for the balls. When she comes out, the pearls are in her hair, and there's like more of a marked difference that you don't feel as much in the 1995 version. But it, like, again, they both work tonally. Like, the fact that the 1995 version is this kind of funnier, brighter, livelier version, it works that they're all clean and, like, that everything is kind of streamlined. And then in the 2005 version, the idea that it's supposed to kind of land a little bit more realistically, and there's pigs running around and geese running around and paint chipping on the walls in certain rooms in the, you know, at Longbourn. It all kind of works with these ideas that their clothes, you know, feel more lived in and more worn. So I mean, it works, but yeah, there are definitely moments that are distracting that don't exist in the 95 version for me.
Yeah. Well, and then, like, back to the hair briefly. So for 95, so Jennifer Ayla had to wear a wig as well. And, like, I don't love the curls in the front, but it doesn't look
They're accurate.
as
That's
annoying.
The thing.
They're accurate. They are accurate. And, like, I mean, and these are expensive wigs. I mean, I'm assuming whatever wig they did for Kiera Knightly would also be very expensive, like handmade wig. Yeah. You'd think, but it still doesn't look great. And then
I think they were still playing to the vanity. Like, they wanted the bangs to look cute. And so thus they looked wispy and not at all period. And if you're doing a wig, why can't you get your curls right? I feel
it is distracting.
It's distracting.
Right.
She looked way too, like, windswept in 2005. So
yeah, agree. And then just to bring this up as an interesting, you know, trivia point, apparently the woman who played Jane in 95, that was her real hair, and she had really long hair and she agreed to cut the front to do the curls to make it look correct, which I thought, like, Alexa, you and I have talked about how, like, this is a thing, like, which is kind of crazy.
Do it for your art.
Yep.
I feel like that now. So, my husband gave me a quarantine haircut. I feel a little bit like that right now. Just putting that out.
No, you don't look like that. Let's see.
All
What
right.
else,
Do we
guys?
want to? I mean, we're almost at 2 hours, so do we want to wrap it
Yeah,
up?
we should probably wrap it up. I was going to ask the audience one last good question, which was, which other version of Pride and Prejudice do you love besides these two? Because there, obviously there's a
There are
1940.
others, yeah.
45 version, I believe, and then there's one in the 80s. And then, of course, there are there's Bridget Jones and all the other spin-offs. So if you guys have other favorites, let us know in the comments, because I really like the 1945 version, if that's the correct year. I could be wrong. Could be 48 anyway. But I don't know. I mean, it's not as modern as these ones.
I haven't seen it, which I know makes me terrible. I've seen all the modern ones.
No,
it's not
I don't
terrible.
remember it.
So have you guys seen the Lizzie Bennet Diaries?
I love the
haven't.
Lizzie Bennet Diaries.
Oh my
I haven't
god.
yet.
It's so good. It's like I randomly just fell upon it, and I ended up staying up till 3 a.m, finishing all 100 episodes. It was so good.
And it makes you really like Lydia, which is cool. Like it's fun. And I'm biased because I actually went to college with M.K. Wiles, who plays Lydia in that version. But Liz, even objectively, I feel like Lydia is so much more sympathetic when you put her in a more modern context than in that version. While still feeling like Lydia, I really like that version.
And their cat is named Kitty. It's not like they don't actually have a sister named Kitty. They have a cat named Kitty.
Oh, that's funny. That's cute. Okay, so I guess I was do we want to talk about the first proposal scene? I mean, or is this a little too deep dive? I mean, we've done a pretty deep dive.
Oh, we didn't. Well, you're right. That is pretty pivotal. I like them both for different reasons. I love the accuracy and the anger, the feelings in the miniseries one. It gives me feels in a completely different way from the rain scene. And the rain scene just that's just a
sexy.
Different, but both great. But oh my god, it's sexy. It's so sexy. It's upsetting. Yeah. So I love it. Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting. Remembering. Okay, so same thing I thought the first time I watched the movie, which was that he spat out everything really fast, McFadden, and in the proposal scene, and I thought that was an interesting take. I mean, obviously, it's he wants to get it out there because it's clearly been torturing him. I don't know if it was. I mean, I guess I like the Firth version just because
he's more bumbling, but that's more his interpretation across the board.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Whereas the Firth one is very much every little line has an intention behind it, almost. He clearly thought about where the beats go. He and the director probably thought about where each beat needs to go and how the scene has to evolve, because it's a long scene. In both versions, it's a long scene, but it's a pivotal one, obviously.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Fan favorite.
Yeah. So, okay, so it looks like people are saying, what do we have in the comments for good ones? Let's see. Becoming Jane, missed out. Yeah, we still have to talk about those, Alexa, eventually.
Yeah, non-literal adaptations.
Yes. All of which are kind of, inspired by Pride and Prejudice to some extent, right? And I mean, I think we all I'm guessing that all of us in our work have used Pride and Prejudice as some kind of inspiration. And so maybe we just go around really quickly for our last kind of, to conclude this and talk about what we have taken from Pride and Prejudice personally as writers.
The archetypes.
First, Alexa?
Yeah, the archetypes. Lizzie, Darcy, mostly Lizzie, Darcy, hate to love, angst, slow burn, misunderstandings, all of it. Love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And
I really like the witty Dorothy. I was actually feeling like I was.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think there was a delay on my end. No, I really love the witty back and forth. I noticed, actually, I was watching this week, and I've been working on scenes that were not romantic scenes in the book I'm currently writing, and I literally got bits of dialogue that I'm going to have a later back and forth between my romantic leads, and just got them down because I had been watching these adaptations, and just the back and forth of the dialogue is so crisp and witty, and it works so well. It plays off itself so well. And again, like I was saying before, I think the sister relationships, and I don't know, in my series that I have out, I have, when I very first conceived of it, it was this idea of, you know, the shot, and this is actually in the 2005 version, where they're moving through the house and you see all the sisters, right? And they're all doing something and you kind of get a sense of who the family is. Like that was very much one of my first ideas when I was picturing my mermaid series, was they're in this house in Malibu and you're going through and you see all these sisters and they're all doing different things and you're getting a sense of their relationship, and you just go down one layer to these like secret grottos underneath the house where they're mermaids. So it was like this Pride and Prejudice plus mermaids was very much like one of my literally very first visuals that I got of my series. So I will forever owe Pride and Prejudice for that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think for me, like the archetypes, of course, like I mean, like I did a thesis on Darcy, right? So it's definitely the archetypes, but like what I love about the way that Austen has created these characters is that she has created flawed characters that still have a learning curve in a story, and the reader is still willing to like die on an altar for these characters despite their flaws. Like, you know, like I will still defend Lizzie to my like, you know, with my last dying breath, even though I know that part of like her growing arc is like her prejudice as well, you know, and her pride. So I think that like understanding how to take like these flawed characteristics and build them into a romance, when so many times it's so easy to create like these perfect characters in a romance and not give them like those painful like quirks that they need to have to feel human. So that's what I've taken as a writer for sure from Austen's book.
That is such a good point, Nisha. Like
Yeah.
the flawed characters who you can love and who are not an archetype. I mean, they're archetypes, but they're not from what, you know, novels from previous to Austen, many of them had characters that were not deep, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or they were just more of a trope than they were a person. And like for
Mm-hmm.
me, Pride and Prejudice, you get characters who feel like real people, even though of course they're, you know, of course they're drama, you know, they're heightened, etc. But like
Sure.
they feel like real people. And like I think that's why so many of us love this novel and get so passionate about it, and so passionate about these characters in movies and adaptations, etc. Like because it has an impact on us on a like some deep level. And it's just, anyway, it's amazing. But like I feel like one of the things I did specifically that Pride and Prejudice had a impact on me for my book, and for Dangerous Alliance specifically, is like that Darcy is such a, you know, hidden kind of mystery personality. Like you don't, you know, because most of Pride and Prejudice is from Lizzie's point of view, you don't know what's going on with him. You don't know why he's such a jerk at the beginning and what his issues are. And so, like interestingly, I tried to do a little bit of that with Dangerous Alliance, where I have my main male character, Tom, is you don't know what's going on with him, even though I'm like in his point of view. I tried to, and initially I had it where he had lots of feelings, lots of thoughts, and my editor specifically said, I think he has to be more Darcy-esque, where you don't quite know what's going on with him. And, you know, after like a moment or two of pushback on my part, I was like, she's right, because that's what people like relate to with a character like that, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
Darcy. And I think that's why Darcy is so enduring, because you don't know what's going on and you want to know what's going on underneath all that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not bluster, all that like quietness, really, and what's going on in his head. You don't know until very late in the book, and you want to know. And you want Lizzie to know, which is, you know,
Tension, romantic tension.
exactly. So yeah, well, thank you guys. I think we have talked quite a bit about Pride and Prejudice today, which has been such a pleasure.
Yay.
Yes. Yay. And thank you guys so much for coming, and, you know, everyone who's come and commented on and spent time with us. Like, we so appreciate it. I'm glad, you know, someone told me today that this has been like something fun for you guys to do and watch while we're in the middle of, you know, the world crashing down in some respects, and like not to go into it too much, but you know, I really appreciate it, and like thank you so much, Alexa, for hosting this on your amazing channel.
Yes, thank you so much.
Because it's
been a
been
good time.
so fun.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I was just say we're thinking of doing more of the other adaptations. Like we don't have a designs or scheduling, but yeah, we're into like Clueless and Austenland and Lost in Austin. So we'll probably like continue. I'll probably throw something up on my community tab with like a poll so you can like vote for ones that you like, and we'll do more fun discussions.
Yes, so stay tuned. We'll try and hopefully do some of those later in the summer. If we can, I mean, we should be able to. But yeah, so stay tuned, and also, you know, watch Alexa's community tab for that if you want to vote on those kinds of things, because that's always fun. So yes, okay, let's go. Tobie, let's have you tell everyone about your book one more time.
Okay, mermaids living in modern California on land in secret. There's book 1, Emerge, book 2, Submerge, and book 3, Immerse, which is personally my favorite cover because mermaid.
Nisha, yes, please.
Yeah, sure. So my so-called Bollywood life, there we go, is my YA that's out. The second YA that's in the same universe comes out next July, Radha and Jay's Recipe for Romance. But I do have a book that's coming out in 5 weeks. It's the follow-up to my adult romance, The Takeover Effect. It's called The Legal Affair. So that's coming out, and that's up for pre-order.
Yay, exciting.
You guys are really sexy, like, you know, brown billionaires. I'm just saying.
Hey, if you're here, you probably like romance, so check those out. So yes, Alexa, I think we're good.
It's my channel, you know me, whatever. I have books, it's great. And get Dangerous Alliance by Jennieke if you love Jane Austen, like seriously.
Really do. Really do. It's so good. If you've been watching all of these and you haven't picked up Jennica's book yet, you will love it. Like if you love Austen enough to have watched all of these talks, you're exactly the person who will love Jennica's book. Just saying.
Thank you guys.
All right, so thank you for joining us. Have a good rest of your day, and yeah, let's keep